After his stunning victories across Gaul, Julius Caesar had established himself as a near-invincible force. The legions marched under his banner, and most of the Gallic tribes had either surrendered or been subdued. But in 52 BCE, the tide of war was beginning to change. Caesar was no longer dealing with disorganized tribal factions. The rise of a formidable Gallic leader, Vercingetorix, chief of the Arverni tribe, would soon challenge everything Caesar had built. And it was at Gergovia that Caesar would face one of his greatest tests, a rare and humbling defeat. The Gallic tribes, once fragmented and often at odds with one another, had found a charismatic and capable leader in Vercingetorix. He was not only a brilliant tactician, but also a master at uniting the often fractious tribes. Rallying under his leadership, the Gauls now posed a formidable threat. Vercingetorix had learned from Caesar's campaigns, adapting his strategies and focusing on fortifying key positions. His decision to take a stand at Gergovia would be a pivotal moment in the Gallic resistance. Gergovia was a well-fortified hilltop city in the heart of the Arverni territory. The natural landscape surrounding the city provided a strong defensive position. Steep cliffs, dense forests and rugged terrain made it almost impregnable. It was here that Vercingetorix had gathered his forces, confident that the Romans could not easily dislodge him. For Caesar, Gergovia presented a new kind of challenge. Unlike many of his previous battles, which involved field engagements, Gergovia was a siege, a test not just of Roman discipline, but of strategic cunning and patience. Caesar knew that taking Gergovia would be difficult, but he also understood the symbolic importance of the city. If he could crush Vercingetorix here, it would break the back of the Gallic resistance. But if he failed, the Gauls would grow bolder, and his reputation as an unstoppable conqueror would be questioned. As Caesar's legions approached Gergovia, the tension was palpable. His men, veterans of countless battles, knew this would be unlike anything they had faced before. The towering heights of the city loomed ahead, and the Gallic warriors manning the walls were eager to defend their homes. Vercingetorix, from his fortified position, watched the Roman legions with confidence. He knew that the terrain was in his favour, and Caesar would be forced to fight an uphill battle, literally. Caesar, ever the strategist, began his approach with caution. He ordered his legions to construct camps at strategic points around the city, cutting off supply routes and attempting to isolate the Gauls within Gergovia. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Caesar's forces had managed to seize key positions on the lower slopes of the hill, and the Roman siege machines were brought forward to batter the walls. But the Gauls, under Vercingetorix's command, were well prepared. They harassed the Romans with constant skirmishes and ambushes, exploiting their superior knowledge of the terrain. One of Caesar's strengths had always been his ability to anticipate his enemies' moves, but at Gergovia things did not unfold as expected. The Gauls fought with a tenacity that Caesar had not yet encountered in this campaign. Vercingetorix's leadership had inspired them, and they fought not just for survival, but for the freedom of all Gaul. As the days dragged on, Caesar realized that his usual tactics of quick, decisive engagements were not working. The Gauls were content to sit behind their walls, launching sorties to keep the Romans off balance, but refusing to engage in a full-scale battle. Caesar's frustration grew. He needed to find a way to draw the Gauls out or break their defences. In a bold move, Caesar decided to launch a feigned retreat. He hoped that by withdrawing some of his forces, Vercingetorix might be tempted to leave the safety of Gergovia and pursue the Romans. If Vercingetorix took the bait, Caesar could then turn his legions around and attack the Gauls in the open. But Vercingetorix, ever the cautious leader, was not fooled. He held his forces inside the city, refusing to fall into Caesar's trap. With the feigned retreat having failed, Caesar opted for a more direct approach. He ordered a full-scale assault on the city's lower defences, hoping to breach Gergovia's outer fortifications and force the Gauls into a decisive confrontation. The Roman legions, disciplined and experienced, moved forward with precision. But the steep terrain and the well-fortified positions of the Gauls made the assault difficult from the start. The fighting was fierce. Roman soldiers clambered up the hills, trying to scale the walls under a constant barrage of arrows, stones and javelins from the Gallic defenders. Vercingetorix, watching from the heights, directed his warriors with skill and precision. The Gauls had the high ground, and every Roman advance was met with brutal resistance. Despite the overwhelming odds, Caesar's legions managed to gain a foothold on part of the city's outer defences. For a moment it seemed as though victory might be within their grasp, but then disaster struck. The Roman forces had overextended themselves, pushing too far into enemy territory without securing their flanks. Vercingetorix, seeing an opportunity, ordered a counterattack. The Gauls surged from their positions, hitting the Romans with a ferocity that took them by surprise. The Roman legions, isolated and vulnerable, were forced to retreat. What had initially seemed like a breakthrough quickly turned into a rout. Caesar, realizing the danger, ordered his men to fall back to their camps. But the damage had been done. The defeat at Gergovia was a bitter pill for Caesar to swallow. For the first time in the Gallic campaign, he had been forced to retreat in the face of the enemy. His legions, though still loyal and formidable, had suffered a rare setback. Vercingetorix, on the other hand, had achieved a great victory. His strategy of defensive warfare, combined with the natural advantages of Gergovia's terrain, had paid off. For Caesar, Gergovia was a moment of reflection. He had underestimated the resilience of the Gallic people and the leadership of Vercingetorix. But Caesar was not one to dwell on failure. He knew that this defeat, while significant, was not the end of the campaign. Gergovia had been a costly lesson, but it had also provided him with valuable insights into the strengths and weaknesses of his enemy. Vercingetorix, emboldened by his victory, sought to capitalize on the momentum. He sent messengers to other Gallic tribes, urging them to rise up against the Romans. The defeat at Gergovia had proven that Caesar was not invincible, and the time to strike back at Rome was now. Across Gaul, tribes that had previously stayed neutral or even allied with the Romans began to reconsider their positions. But Caesar, ever the tactician, was already planning his next move. He knew that Vercingetorix would likely try to rally more tribes to his cause, and he could not allow the Gallic leader to consolidate his power. While Gergovia had been a setback, Caesar was determined to end the Gallic rebellion once and for all. In the days following the battle, Caesar regrouped his forces. He sent out scouts to monitor the movements of Vercingetorix's army and began to formulate a plan. Gergovia had shown him that a direct assault on a well-fortified position was not always the best course of action. He would need to find a way to draw Vercingetorix out into the open, where the discipline and organization of the Roman legions could once again prove decisive. As the campaign continued, Caesar's focus shifted from Gergovia to Alesia, where the final decisive battle of the Gallic wars would take place. But the memory of Gergovia lingered. It had been a rare defeat for Caesar, a reminder that even the greatest generals were not infallible. Vercingetorix's victory at Gergovia would stand as a symbol of Gallic resistance, a testament to the strength and determination of the tribes that had dared to defy Rome. But Caesar, as always, remained undeterred. The road to victory might be longer than he had anticipated, but he knew that the ultimate prize, complete control of Gaul, was still within his grasp. Gergovia was a battle that shaped the course of the Gallic wars, a pivotal moment where Caesar learned the price of underestimating his enemies. Though the Romans were forced to retreat, Caesar's resilience and strategic brilliance would soon turn the tide once again in his favour. The Siege of Gergovia marked not the end of the war, but the beginning of a new and more determined phase in Caesar's conquest of Gaul.